Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Tuesday, August 26th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, a judge temporarily blocks Kilmar Abrego Garcia's deportation, plus Trump signs separate executive orders on flag burning and cash bonds. And we look at some of the issues colliding amid back to school. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from deporting Kilmar Abrego Garcia for a second time after he was wrongfully removed to El Salvador earlier this year. The district judge in Maryland ruled from the bench yesterday that the government cannot deport Abrego Garcia until she can hold a hearing on his latest lawsuit challenging his deportation. The order came just hours after U.S. immigration agents detained him when he reported to an Immigration and Customs Enforcement field office in Baltimore for what his attorneys had been told was a mandatory check-in. Agents detained him within 60 seconds of his arrival, according to his attorney. Abrego Garcia's detention is the latest chapter in a case that started back in March when he was stopped near his home in Maryland and deported to a Salvadoran mega prison. From flag burning to cash bonds, President Donald Trump signed off on some major executive orders yesterday. I spoke with USA Today White House correspondent Bart Jansen for more, and apologies for any outdoor sounds you hear. Bart joined me from outside the White House. Hey there, Bart.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on. So just starting with the basics on this first point, what did Trump announce here with this executive order about flag burning?
He has long wanted to punish people who burn flags. He's talked about it during the 2024 campaign. He's talked about it years earlier than that during his first administration. There are occasionally flag burning demonstrations, and he's very upset about it. So he's talked about wanting to have a 1-year jail term for people who burn flags. He mentioned that term again as he signed an executive order, but the executive order doesn't technically refer to an actual penalty for burning flags. What it really does is discusses how to have the Justice Department pursue charges against people for flag burning, but to basically piggyback those charges on other crimes so that, for example, if somebody were conducting a violent crime or a hate crime, that if they were burning a flag at the same time, that you would charge that as an additional charge and try to get an additional criminal punishment for that.
Bart, what does the First Amendment tell us about this issue and what the president can do? What are you hearing from legal experts?
For the longest time, the federal courts have said that flag burning is political speech, that it can't be criminalized because by doing that alone, that it is a form of speech which would be protected under the First Amendment. There's a landmark 1989 Supreme Court case that says that it's political speech so that it does not fall under criminal charges. Trump actually refers to that decision in his executive order and basically says, yeah, but that decision never protected violent speech or what are called fighting words, that, the idea that you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. So he wants the Justice Department basically to charge flag burning as effectively an incitement to riot. That's a phrase that's used in the executive order.
Well, Bart, switching gears here, separately, Trump also signed orders dealing with cash bonds. What do we know about this move, and how is it part of, a broader focus on crime and policing?
He contends that largely democratic jurisdictions, cities and states that have eliminated the need to pay a cash bond when a person is charged with a crime in order to get out of jail while awaiting trial, that by abolishing cash bonds, that basically there's no incentive to show up to court. And he thinks that's a bad idea because he argues that you're letting criminals go. So he's trying to force jurisdictions to no longer have cashless bonds. So he signed 2 orders, one of which is specifically for the District of Columbia, where the federal government has a little more direct control and basically just says you should not have cash-free bonds anymore. And if you do, they will just start eliminating federal spending there in the Capitol. He signed another order to discourage other jurisdictions from keeping their cash-free bonds basically under the same threat that if they continue the policy, then they'd be threatened with the loss of federal funding.
All right, a flurry of Monday moves. Bart Jansen covers the White House for USA Today. Thank you, Bart.
Thanks for having me.
Nearly 3 dozen staff at the agency that responds to natural disasters warned Congress in a letter yesterday that inexperience in the Trump administration could lead to a Hurricane Katrina level disaster. The letter, signed by 35 named employees at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, said the agency's current leaders, including Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and acting FEMA Director David Richardson, don't have the qualifications to manage natural disasters. The letter asked Congress to make FEMA an independent cabinet-level agency free from interference from DHS and to protect FEMA employees from politically motivated firings. The Trump administration has said FEMA is well prepared to respond to hurricanes this year. Back to school looks different this year. I spoke with USA Today's Zach Shermley for more on some of the issues popping up as students return to the classroom. Zach, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Taylor.
So let's start with vaccines. Of course, there was a really concerning measles outbreak that hit Texas and other states hard over the past year. What are you hearing about vaccination rates for measles, mumps, and rubella in particular going into the new school year?
My colleague, Adriana Rodriguez, who's one of our health reporters, has done some great coverage of this. And she reported in our recent back to school guide that in the 2019 to 2020 school year, only 3 states reported that less than 90% of kindergartners were vaccinated against measles, mumps, and rubella. But last year, that figure actually rose to 16 states. So something that health experts are really keeping an eye on this back to school season is the fact that, due largely to religious or philosophical reasons, more parents nationwide are exempting their kids from receiving mandated vaccinations before they head back to school. My colleague Adriana also reported that the last school year, 17 states had more than 5% of kindergartners claiming a non-medical vaccine exemption.
Well, shifting gears, the Trump administration has clearly cracked down on schools with LGBTQ plus inclusive policies and diversity programs in a number of ways, Zach. What's happening on this front as we enter the fall?
So the Trump administration has made clear that it has a zero tolerance stance toward diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And I think it's important when we have these types of conversations that we clarify what exactly it is that we mean when we say DEI. The acronym is kind of nebulous, I think, due to the politicization of it, but it usually refers to programs in schools that aim to eliminate racial and socioeconomic disparities on school campuses. I remember you and I, Taylor, talking about how in March, the Department of Education gave states and local school districts an ultimatum, essentially saying you need to get rid of your DEI programs, which federal officials said violated civil rights laws or risk losing federal funding. It was really an unprecedented ask from the federal government. And then the Trump administration said that school leaders had just 2 weeks to comply with that mandate. Ultimately, that certification request was somewhat softened, but we've seen now, due to litigation that has been brought against the federal government, that there were a number of school districts nationwide that did certify that they were being compliant with federal civil rights laws, but also made the argument to the Department of Education that their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs actually don't violate those laws. So there's a really key argument between school district officials, state education leaders, and the education department. Regardless, the Trump administration had to contend with the fact that a federal judge in mid-August actually deemed its anti-DEI mandate unlawful, even though it had been blocked since April.
Zach, we're also seeing a new nutritional standards taking effect, right? What's happening on that front?
So the U.S. Department of Agriculture finalized regulations that made it so that school meals are largely going to become more nutritious in the fall. I think while a lot of us were paying attention to some of the more controversial headlines related to changes in federal policy. We haven't talked as much about the fact that in July, the Agriculture Department actually finalized those regulations, which mean that the amount of added sugar in cereals, yogurt, and milk has been limited and will be limited going into the fall. And then by the fall of 2027, those restrictions are going to get a lot stricter and could include some more reductions in sodium. I think that there are a lot of parents who are worried, and teachers certainly, who are worried about how changes to federal safety net programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, could affect universal school meal programs. But, health experts and school nutrition experts that I talked to were very adamant to say that those changes are not necessarily taking effect immediately, and that's more of a concern for the longer term.
Well, and Trump signed an executive order to reinstate the presidential fitness test earlier this summer. Does that mean the test is coming back for all students, Zach?
So the presidential fitness test is something that I have heard a lot about from parents and from teachers. For over half a century, the test, which in the past has included 1 mile runs, push-ups, sit-ups, and other types of physical challenges, was administered in schools nationwide. And then former President Barack Obama replaced it with a more holistic youth health program in 2012. It's really not clear yet what exactly the newest version of the test could look like or when it's going to be returning to schools. But President Trump signed an executive order that directed the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as a new presidential council, to come up with suggestions for how to implement the test. And hopefully, once we have those details, we will try and put ourselves as USA Today reporters to the test and can report back for you on how that goes, Taylor.
All right, looking forward to that. That's USA Today's Zach Shermley. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Taylor.
As Major League Baseball pennant races heat up this month, 4 days of tryouts for the inaugural season of a different league drew to a close with a pair of scrimmages yesterday. The Women's Professional Baseball League is nearly here. It'll announce the half-dozen teams competing next month, and the inaugural draft, for which women were trying out over the past week, will be held in October. Then next May, the league will launch its inaugural season. At tryouts, the league was already linking generations. 98-year-old Maybelle Blair was in attendance. She played in the World War II-era All-American Girls Professional Baseball League and threw out a ceremonial first pitch during the scrimmages this week. She told USA Today, quote, "I'm reliving my life through these girls. The good old boys in baseball always wanted to keep baseball for the boys. You should play softball. No, we shouldn't. We should play baseball," unquote. You can read more about the upcoming league and hear my special deep dive conversation from earlier this year about what to expect, with links in today's show notes. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.